What do a 9 a.m. quick chat, a generic keynote, and a bicycle tool tree in rural France have in common? They're all about friction. Either you remove it or you create it. I'm Nigel Ridpath, and this is Standing Apart, where we celebrate the people and businesses who choose to break the mold. Today we're talking about something that quietly kills good businesses. Not bad service, not lack of effort, not even competition. It's being easy to compare. Because if a buyer can't tell you apart, they'll default to one of three things: price, brand, or whoever replied fastest. And none of those are a great basis for a long-term business. So in this episode, I'm going to give you a practical framework you can use to become hard to compare. And yes, as always, I'll be letting off steam in my 1-minute rant. And then I'll tell you about my business superhero of the week, which is genuinely a post. A very useful post. Before we start, if you're getting value from these fortnightly stories of innovation and differentiation, take a moment to subscribe and rate the show. It helps more potential pioneers and game changers discover how to stand apart. Right, let's get into it. Here's a question that sounds a bit rude, but it's worth asking. If I swapped your logo with a competitor's, would anyone notice? I don't mean your mum or not your best client. I mean a busy buyer who has 3 tabs open, a meeting in 10 minutes, and a vague sense that they should improve their company's productivity or sort out the culture or get better at sales, whatever it is that you do. Most of the time, the answer is uncomfortable, because we all say the same things. Bespoke, tailored, end-to-end, we partner with you, we're passionate about whatever it might be. And the problem with those phrases is not that they're false, it's that they're non-differentiating. They don't help a buyer choose. So what happens? The buyer compares on what they can compare: price, availability, brand recognition, maybe the prettiest website, or the person who seems most confident on a call. I'll come back to it and say it again: price. And if you're a trainer, a consultant, a services business, that's where it gets particularly brutal. Let me give you my own example. In the world of keynote speaking, I'm not compared to another person like me. I'm being compared to the idea of the keynote. And if the buyer's mental model is motivational leadership talk, how on earth do I compete? You can't, not really, because if the buyer wants generic motivation, I'm competing with an Olympian or a World Cup winner, a celebrity entrepreneur, or someone who can tell a dramatic story about overcoming adversity while a highlight reel plays behind them. And that's not a fair fight. So the move is to not fight harder. The move is to change the category. So in my case again, instead of motivational leadership talk, I shifted to become a practical lesson on storytelling as a leadership skill, or a framework for making your messages stick. And sometimes I might even frame it as a tool leaders can use on a Monday morning. My talks are specifically about the need for storytelling in leadership and business, and then I teach a practical framework I've researched and developed called the Scheherazade effect. The idea of a framework is very valuable. Most organizations don't have one. As a test, Google the 5 most local solicitors to your home. They will tell you the areas of law they cover and probably a bit about the personnel involved. I would be very surprised if any of them talked about the way that they engage with clients. But frameworks make you hard to be compared. So here's the checklist: 5 ways to become hard to compare without turning into a gimmick. Firstly, be specific about who you are for. not business leaders, not SMEs, not anyone who wants to grow. Who is it really for? Because if it's for everyone, it's really for no one. And the more specific you are, the more your message lands. Secondly, be really specific about the problem you solve. Not improve sales, not increase engagement. What is the problem in plain English? For me, it's something like leaders are expected to inspire and align people, but they rely on bullet points and corporate jargon, and then they wonder why nobody remembers what they said. That's the specific problem. Then we come on to the framework thing. This is where most people fall down. They say we're consultative or using a partnership approach. That's not a method. A method is something you can name and describe in steps. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't even have to be that unique. It just has to be recognizable. And this is where I want to give you something you can use. The reason this matters for differentiation is simple. If you can tell a story that people can repeat in a room you're not in, you become harder to compare. Because you're not just a supplier, you're the person who made the problem feel real and the decision feels safe. Fourthly, prove it. Proof always beats promises. If your proof is we're experienced, that's not proof. Proof is what changed, for whom, how quickly, and what it looked like in the real world. Even if you don't have formal case studies, you can still be specific. You can talk about what people say afterwards, what they do differently, what leaders report back a month later. Specificity is an essential part of the proof. Finally, specify a trade-off, and this is the bit that feels scary, but it's the bit that makes you most memorable. Say what you don't do and say who it's not for. In my case, I don't do generic motivation keynotes. Because if you want generic motivation, you should hire an Olympian. Genuinely, they'll be amazing. But if you want a practical framework for storytelling that your leaders can use, that's my lane. And the trade-off is what makes the lane real. So that's the checklist. Specific customer, specific problem, specific method, specific proof, specific trade-off. Now, let me make this even more practical, because the biggest mistake people make with differentiation is they treat it like branding. A logo, a color palette, a new website. That's not differentiation. Differentiation is what happens in the buyer's head when they try to explain you to someone else. If they can't explain you, they can't buy you. And if they can explain you in a sentence that could apply to anyone else, you're too easy to compare. So here's your move. If you can't say it clearly, the buyer can't buy it clearly. You will know by now that I love to offload. There are all sorts of things that wind me up, and each episode I get to have a rant. But in the interest of my well-being, I limit myself to no more than a minute. So here is this week's 1-minute rant. Start the clock. It's about the phrase, quick chat? Not a quick chat with a friend, that's lovely. I mean the work version, the message that lands at 08:57 on a Tuesday. Got 5 minutes for a quick chat. No subject, no context, no agenda. Just a little calendar ambush wrapped up in politeness. And the thing is, it's never 5 minutes, is it? It's 15 minutes of you trying to reverse engineer what the other person actually wants while your brain is still booting up. If you want my time, fine, ask for it. I'm very generous with my time. But don't make me do the work of figuring out what the conversation is about. Clarity is respect. If it's worth a meeting, it's worth a sentence. Stop the clock. Right, let's get back to the topic of being hard to compare. It's time to get practical. I'm going to give you a simple way to apply this that doesn't require a brand agency, a new website, or a 3-day offsite with sticky notes. It's a simple rewrite exercise. Pick one of these, your LinkedIn headline, your website homepage headline, the first paragraph of a recent proposal, or the first 30 seconds of how you introduce yourself. Now, here's the test. If you removed your name, could it belong to anyone else in your industry? If yes, it's too generic. So you need to rewrite it using this structure. I help specific customer solve specific problem using specific method so they get specific outcome. And then you add one trade-off. This isn't for who it's not for. Let me show you what that looks like for me in the speaking world. So the generic version would be, I deliver leadership talks for business. Now, that could be anyone. It's not wrong, it's just not useful. So my hard to compare version is, I help leaders who need their messages to stick to learn a practical storytelling framework. I call it the Scheherazade effect. So their teams remember what matters and then act on it. I'm not your man for anyone who wants a generic motivational talk. Now, you might read that and think, blimey, that's quite specific. Yes, that's the point. Because the right buyer will feel relief. They'll think, finally, someone who understands the real problem I have. And the wrong buyer will self-select out. Also, yes, that's the point. Now, here's where the storytelling tool that I espouse becomes useful in this context. Most people try to prove they're different by listing features, but features don't travel. A story travels. So when you're describing what you do, don't start with we provide or we deliver. Start with a tiny story. Here's a quick before and after. Same message, 2 ways. Before, the classic business version. We're implementing a new system to improve efficiency, visibility, and collaboration across teams. That sentence is perfectly fine, but it's also a sleeping pill with punctuation. Now, after. Last month, Sarah spent 2 evenings away from her young family reconciling numbers because 3 teams had handed her 4 versions of the truth. On Friday, she sent a message that began, I'm sure this is my fault, but, which is the British way of saying, I'm 5 minutes away from resigning. So we're changing the system. 1 source of truth, clear handovers, fewer late nights. So it's the same change, but now you can picture it. You can feel it. You can retell it. That's the point. The real decision often happens when you're not there. Your idea, your company, your proposition gets repeated in a room full of skeptics. And skeptics don't hate you personally. They just have a hobby called risk management. A feature list doesn't survive that room. It gets cross-examined. A story survives. It gets repeated. So if you want to be hard to compare, you need 2 things. A clear sentence that includes specifics and a small story that makes the value feel real. Now, a few extra tips that make this work in real life. Tip 1. Name the enemy. What are you replacing? For me, it's bullet point leadership. For you, it might be generic strategy decks, one-size-fits-all training, we do everything agencies, or maybe standard financial reporting. Name it, because people rally around a contrast. Tip 2, productize one thing. I've made my own Scheherazade effect, for instance. Even if you're in a service business, have one named thing. A diagnostic, a workshop, a framework, a scorecard, a methodology. It makes you easier to buy and harder to compare. Tip 3, make proof easy. You don't need a 40-page case study. You need a few specific lines that you can say without wincing. So something like, people tell me they use this in their next all hands, or leaders report that this has transformed their board meetings, or something like, I was delighted when a recent client said that this had decreased their churn rate by 20%. Specific, human, believable. My 4th tip is say the trade-off out loud. This is the courageous bit, but it's also the clarity bit. If you don't say what you don't do, the buyer will assume you do the generic thing, and then you'll be compared to the generic thing, and then you'll lose to someone cheaper, bigger, or louder. So say it. We're not for everyone. Good. Now here's a little exercise you can do this week. Take your rewritten sentence and send it to 3 people. One who knows you well, one who doesn't know you well, and one who is your ideal buyer. And ask them one question. After reading this, what do you think I do? If their answers are all different, you're still too vague. If the answers are basically the same, you're getting there. And now it's time for my superhero of the week. This one isn't a celebrity CEO or a venture-backed wunderkind. It's a bit of infrastructure, a post, a very practical post. 2 weeks ago, I was over in Normandy in France, mooching around the SNCF station, La Guzinière-Cancale. Excuse my pronunciation. Outside the station, there was what I can only describe as a bicycle tool tree, a solid post with a set of bike tools attached, Allen keys, tyre levers, a pump, all tethered securely so that they don't wander off, but properly usable. Now, on the face of it, it's a small thing. But it's exactly the sort of small thing that tells you whether someone has understood the job to be done. Because integrated transport isn't a strategy document. It isn't a slogan about sustainability. It's the moment you get off a train and you're trying to do the last mile, is whether you can confidently bring a bike into the picture without adding hassle. If you cycle to a station, the failure modes are boring and predictable. A saddle slips, a bolt loosens, a tyre goes soft. You don't need a concierge, you need 5 minutes, a couple of tools and a pump. And what I loved about this tool tree is that it quietly says, we've thought about that. Not with an app, not with a QR code, not with a download this to unlock the pump nonsense. Just the tools, right there, where the problem shows up. That's integrated transport done properly. It's not just connecting timetables, it's connecting experiences. It's acknowledging that the journey is a chain, and the chain breaks at the weakest link. There's also something very confident about it. It's generous, but it's not performative. It doesn't need a press release. It doesn't need you to clap. It just works. And from a standing apart point of view, it's a brilliant reminder that differentiation often lives in the unglamorous details. the things that remove friction, the things that make people think, this place gets it. So whoever decided that outside that SNCF station there should be a bicycle tool tree attached securely, ready for real people with real bikes and real problems, you are absolutely my superhero of the week, because that is what standing apart looks like. Practical, thoughtful, integrated. So we're coming to the time to wrap up. If you're being compared on price or availability or brand, it's usually not because you're doing a bad job. It's because you're being compared in the wrong category. So your job this week is simple. Take one sentence that describes what you do, rewrite it with the specifics I talked about, and end with a trade-off. And then test it on 3 humans. Now, if you do that and you get a good before and after, I'd genuinely love to see it. Email me at standingapartpod@hotmail.com or message me on LinkedIn with your positioning story. Tell me what you changed. Tell me what you stopped saying. Tell me what you started saying. Because those little shifts are where the real differentiation lives. And if you're new here, you're in for a treat. Dive back into the back catalogue. There are interviews and solo episodes all built around one idea. In a world of conformity, your difference is your superpower. Quick word as well, if you're getting value from the show, please subscribe and rate it on your favourite podcast app. It takes seconds, but it makes a real difference in helping other people discover these stories. Until next time, remember, don't just be better, be harder to compare. In other words, stand apart. Standing Apart is a Sun Bear Consulting production.